Hello everyone, today we are going to do this foundation paper piecing pattern by 10 Cow Quilts. It is copyrighted and I have asked for her permission to use this pattern to make this tutorial. I will link her Etsy store in the description box below. And I would really appreciate if you follow along, or if you enjoy this tutorial, that you buy her pattern. It's only $4.50 and you get the pattern for 5-inch square, 6-inch square, 8-inch square, and a 10-inch square. Okay, so when you print out the pattern, this is what the pattern will look like. Okay, and you will get a page that gives you the instructions on how to put it together, like this. This is why I really enjoy her patterns. And then it also gives you a block like this, like a planning block where you're supposed to color it in, but I just wrote the colors in. So, and I like to keep this, and I'll show you why in a second. Okay, so we're doing the 10-inch pattern today, and when you print it out, it will look like this, and you will cut it out on the outside of this gray line, because that's your 1/4 inch allowance to sew the block together. Okay, so as you can see, it says A1, right? And then B quadrant, and then C quadrant, and then D quadrant. Okay, and when you cut those out and put it together, the finished block will end up looking like beautiful like this one. Okay, so I have prepped ahead of time these blocks. So I cut out 2.5 inch width of fabric strips, or you can use a jelly roll. Okay, and then these are 3.5 inch squares cut on the diagonal for the two sides, and this is a 4.5 inch square background cut on the diagonal for this, for the 10-inch. That will work for the 10-inch. That's what we're doing today. Okay, so I'll show you why this is really handy. Okay, because I go ahead and cut all mine out, right? And then I just follow along with this. This is C, it goes on this side. This is D, actually C down here, and D. Hi, Pearl. Say hi. B. Okay. So I go ahead and lay them all out like this, right? And then going along with my guide here, I will write on here what color everything is supposed to be, okay? So I don't get confused. And I do this every time. Okay, so if you know you're going to make the same block over and over, you can go ahead and write these on and then photocopy that, and then they'll always be on there for you. Okay, that's a little tip. But I hang this up in front of me, so so I always have this to go off of, which is very nice. Okay, so I have done B, C, and D. Okay, and together we are going to do A. Alright, so the very first thing that you need to do, let me pull you down some. Okay, the very first thing we're going to do is I'm going to crease every single one of these sew lines. Okay, so this is the back of the the cardboard part of a charm pack at the bottom. Okay, So I pulled it up to the line like this, okay, and I fold it over, pull this out, and then fold it back both ways, okay, and I do that on every line. It makes it easier later on down the line, okay. Okay, so we have our piece folded. Okay, so here's our pieces, right? And we will need some very flat pins. I really think you need some, like these. These are great, but these are not going to work for what we're trying to do because the head is too big, okay? All right, so I just want to show you what I'm talking about. So when we're looking at it, what you're doing is actually looking at the back of the finished piece, okay, when you're looking down at it like this, because look, here's our right side, okay, so keep that in mind. When you're working on foundation paper piecing, apparently you are looking down at the back, okay. So when you lay your pieces down, just remember the good side needs to be away, going away, okay. So what I'm going to do is take so I'm going to eyeball it, okay, and line up this point with this point, okay, and I'm going to put a pin in. Okay, there we go. All right. Just keep working on it till you get it, okay? So I try to pin it along this sew line and along this sew line. When you pin it twice like that, it keeps it from kind of pivoting, okay? So I'm going to remove this pin. All right, so here is where the magic of the folding comes in. We can fold this back and make sure, look, we have overhang. This is essentially our seam allowance, okay? And then we can fold this back and we can check, and essentially that's our seam allowance, our overhang, okay? So that's good. Both of those will work, all right? So we're going to look at our color. So when you look at a foundation paper piecing, you can't do this side first, okay? Because there's nothing to attach this part of the red to yet, okay? So the way this has to go is, this is our first piece that we put down, number 1, right? Then we have to put this piece down, number 2, okay? Because that will get us this whole line here, okay? Right? And then we need to put this piece down here, okay? And then either one of these, okay? But I usually do them at the same time, so I'm going to go ahead and put 4 on both of those, okay? So this is our foundation, is where we're going to start, right? Then the first piece we'll attach is the green piece, so we will sew this line, right, first, right? Then we'll lay this red down, and we'll sew this line, okay? And when we have that, we will sew this line, and then we will sew this line, okay? And we will have our piece. All right, so we need green, and we need the green piece. So when I cut these from our 2.5 inch strips, I laid the piece down on here like this, and I just cut it, okay? I just, I was like, okay, just like that. So green is on this side, so we will lay it down here, okay? Because I'll show you using this. When we do our 1/4 inch and then we fold it out, okay, that's what it'll look like, okay? And that's how you can check and see if your piece is going to work out or not. You can always put something down and flip it out and look at it, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab the pin and I'm going to put it right along the seam, parallel with the seam I'm about to sew, okay? Just like that, okay? So that when we flip it over, we are going to sew on this line for the green line, okay? So let's do that. Okay, so make sure you understand that you are sewing paper. That's going to dull the needle that you have in here. Or some people have like a paper needle, okay? So what I do is I take 2 steps and I go back 2, right? So that when I pull the pieces of paper off in the back and the end, they don't come off, okay? Or they don't, the stitching doesn't come out. And we're just going to sew right on that line and back stitch. Okay, so that's what the backing looks like. We're going to remove our pins, okay? And then we are going to iron. Okay. Let's bring it back over to the cutting board. All right. And this is where our fold back paper really helps us out, because we don't want all this extra bulk right here. So we're going to take our 1/4, fold it back, right? Because this is where our red one is supposed to go. We only want a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like all of our normal piecing, okay? So there we go. And then we know where to line up our red piece, okay? So flip this back over like this. So we're going to take our red piece, right sides together. I'm going to put it down along our seam allowance we just stuff cut. And we are going to pin it in place parallel to the line that we are about to sew. Okay? Make sure you get 2 pins in there so it doesn't pivot. Okay? So we are going to sew this B line. Okay? 1, 2, and back stitch so that when we pull the paper off, it doesn't pull out our stitching. Alright, so we're good to go. So we are going to remove our pins. Right, and we are going to press this. Okay. Okay, and come back to the cutting board. So now what we need to do is we need to trim up these 2 C lines. Okay, so we're going to bend this back, fold it back, take our ruler on the 1/4 inch, line it up with the folded piece of paper line, and we are going to cut this off. Okay, and we'll do the same thing on this C line right here. Okay, Alright, so this is what we have now, okay? So here's our two pieces of background, right? So this one goes on this side, and this one goes on this side, like this, okay? So we're going to flip them over, line up the top. Make sure you line up this edge with this, okay? You're going to pin parallel, okay? Make sure we're keeping it lined up. Make sure to pin twice, just so we don't have any pivot of the piece, okay? We just don't want it to pivot like that, okay? That won't work. This is too close. Alright, so there's one side. So we will fold this over like this. We will line this up like so, okay? And we will pin. Make sure to pin twice so the piece of fabric doesn't pivot, okay? Alright, so we are going to now sew on both these C-lines. Alright, we're going to back stitch, so when we pull off the paper, it doesn't pull out our stitching. And back stitch at the other end. Alright, let's come back to the cutting board. Alright, let's remove our pins. And let's iron it. Alright, let's come back to the cutting board. Alright, so we need to trim our block up here, okay? So let's get our rotary cutter. So we're going to trim up our block right around the outside of the seam allowance, which is that gray area. Okay, then I'm going to cut all of these strings off. Okay, so now we have our finished block, and if it's not exactly, it's okay, because that's in the seam. Remember, that 1/4 of an inch around the outside is in the seam allowance, okay? So on the next one, I'll show you how to put this block together.